There are no macronutrients in their whole food state that cause disease. Specifically, there's no protein, there's no fat, there's no carb that uniquely causes disease when in whole food. We have historic records showing more than 10,000 years of us consuming pretty much every type of food, from every type of meat, animal that we could possibly eat, fruit, honey, grains, tubers. We've eaten them all for more than 10,000 years, obviously. But we have historic record of eating them without causing metabolic disease. Certainly not the epidemic of metabolic disease that we're now seeing over the last 100, 120 years in the US, and now as we've spread it, as we've exported our disease to the rest of the world. So what changed? What changed is we started making processed food, which now makes up 65% of the US diet, right? So 120 years ago, did we have processed food making up 65% of our diet? No, we ate what we would get from the farm, or what people of indigenous tribes would hunt and gather, right? Eating every meat, every fruit, every grain, what was available for their area. So it's different types of food all over the world that should tell us that there's no single carbohydrate, protein, or fat that's causing disease. And we know, even med school students learn this, we know from science, from the free radical theory of disease or oxidative stress theory of disease. Oxidative stress drives disease. It's the oxidative stress theory of disease. So we have oxidative stress drives inflammation, right? Which leads to atherosclerosis, insulin resistance, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, right? It's oxidative stress. So what foods cause oxidative stress? Apples don't cause oxidative stress. Bananas, honey, red meat, pork, fish, these things don't cause oxidative stress. Now, are there processed foods which fall under macronutrient labels like carbs, fats, or proteins? Of course. But those aren't real foods. Those are foods that have been taken out of their whole food form. And when we extracted them from their whole food form, we left behind the antioxidants that were keeping those foods from oxidizing. Okay? And if we look back, we just have to look back to when did disease start? When did processed foods start? And see, do they correlate? I think history shows that they do. In 1901, only 1% of the population had obesity in the US. A fraction of percent of the population dealt with type 2 diabetes. In fact, even in the 1930s, it was only 1/3 of 1% dealing with type 2 diabetes. First study in heart disease was in 1912. Most doctors never saw a case of heart disease or saw a heart attack. Now it's killing 1 in 4. We're even seeing people younger and younger, okay? So this is not about life expectancy. Oh, we didn't live long enough to see these things. We're seeing diabetes, heart disease forming, obesity in children, in people under 18, which we would not have even seen 50 years ago. Type 2 diabetes was called adult onset type 2 diabetes in the 70s and even the 80s. We never saw kids with type 2 diabetes. We didn't see a bunch of obese kids. It was a random kid that was obese. And now we have obesity at 18, 20%. People under 20 years old. We have type 2 diabetes forming and even heart disease forming in these kids. That is not historically ever happened. And so we've created a new environment. And the first place we need to look is what we're eating. I agree. And how little we're moving, of course. And what the chemicals are in our food. But we have to stop blaming whole food for what processed food did. Now, maybe your body's in a disease state. Maybe you have insulin resistance. And eating that banana or that apple or that homemade bread or that potato throws your blood sugar off. Okay, but you're in a disease state. You're not in a healthy state. You created a disease in your body with your lifestyle choices, with the food that you ate, with the lack of movement maybe that you had. Don't blame the plant, and let's not blame, or even for that matter, blame the meat or the fat for what your body can't seem to process or handle. That's your body. We've eaten meat historically, right? With all types of fat. So not just red meat, pork, chicken, which have polyunsaturated fats. Now, comparing the polyunsaturated fat in a nut, a seed, the pork and poultry to seed oils, again, doesn't make sense. No more than comparing sugar to a piece of fruit, or processed sugar to a piece of fruit, or to a potato. Again, we've extracted nutrients, we've extracted a particular part of the food out of the whole food state, leaving behind the antioxidants that would keep that stable, or leaving behind the food matrix that would keep that particular food stable. And some, like the seed oils, they begin oxidizing immediately after processing. And then we consume these processed foods, which have no antioxidants in them, which is an oxidative process. So all metabolism creates a certain level of oxidative stress because we're using oxygen in our mitochondria to burn these foods, these macronutrients, and turn it into ATPs. But when we do that with whole food, they have antioxidants with them, and they're not coming to our body already heavily oxidized like a processed food is. And so we have those antioxidants, we have E and C, and we have the endogenous glutathione and NADPH we've created to offset the oxidative stress from normal metabolism of whole food. But now processed food makes up 65% of the US diet, right? So 120 years ago, processed food didn't make up the majority of our diet. It barely made up any of our diet. We were eating off the farm. And when we look at indigenous cultures that are eating their cultural diet for which they hunted and gathered, with all types of food, all types of diets, from a high fat, high protein Inuit in the Arctic to a very carby, honey, tuber, berry driven diet in South America or in Africa, where there's months where 80% of their diet comes from carbohydrates, maybe 10-15% of their diet comes from honey, and they can get honey 10 months out of the year. Or they're drinking, like a Maasai, drink milk, 3 liters of milk a day as the males. Females drink 2 liters of milk a day. That's a lot of carbohydrates. That's a lot of saturated fat. That's a lot of animal protein, all of which have been vilified over the last several decades, depending on who you talk to. And yet these are healthy populations without metabolic disease, seeing multiple generations still living together, still moving together. We're blaming Whole Foods for what processed food did. And we're using the excuse that a diseased body can't handle these foods. And instead of blaming the diseased body, instead of blaming the disease which was caused, not genetically inherited, but caused in that body by the processed food, we're blaming the whole food source just because they share a macronutrient, because they share a polyunsaturated fat or a saturated fat or glucose or fructose. It doesn't make sense. It sounds like dogma is what it sounds like. It sounds like fear-mongering. It doesn't sound like logic. It doesn't sound like you've looked at the historic record of humans over the last 10 to 15,000 years who have eaten, again, every type of food in varying amounts, varying ratios of macronutrients. So you want to reverse that disease? Yeah, maybe you need to restrict one of these while you're fixing your body. You certainly need to remove the processed food, remove the processed oils, remove the processed grains, especially ones covered in glyphosate, remove the processed sugar, and even the plant proteins, the processed plant proteins that are in those processed foods. Those are highly oxidative as well. The seed oils are driving disease. Processed sugar maybe shortly behind it. Remove the seed oils, remove the processed food, reduce processed food to 10% of your diet. Remove the seed oils as much as you possibly can. They'll still be there. Understand, seed oils make up 30% of the average American's total calories consumed, 80% of their fat. So we're blaming the fat in, depending on where you stand, which school of diet, which dietary dogma you back, we're blaming the saturated fat in meat, or we're blaming the polyunsaturated fat in pork and nuts and seeds, when 80% of our fat in this country is coming from seed oils. It's the seed oils, folks, right? So it's not the PUFA in the whole food, which is still stable in the food matrix and which comes with antioxidants in our body to help offset the oxidative stress. And it's not the fruit And the potatoes, which have antioxidants and have a stable food matrix, which keep those fats stable or those sugars stable, and then come with antioxidants to help us metabolize them. It's the high level of processed foods that we've eaten that have destroyed our metabolism, that have damaged our mitochondria, that are creating insulin resistance and inflammation and oxidative stress within our arteries, leading to disease. That are oxidizing the cholesterol, right? Healthy cholesterol being delivered in LDL with healthy fats and healthy fat-soluble vitamins. That never bothered anybody. Hasn't bothered anybody historically. Never caused disease until we have 35 years of studies showing it's oxidized cholesterol that is stimulating plaques, not healthy cholesterol. So everything points back to oxidative stress being out of control at a level. So a small dose of it works, right? Exercise, right? Eating certain plants, metabolizing food creates a small level of oxidative stress. But then the dose gets out of control when we're eating highly oxidative food without enough antioxidants to keep it under control. It's oxidative stress out of control, and once it gets beyond what our antioxidants can handle, it's a free radical cascade, which creates new free radicals at the rate of 1 billion or more per second. And it just keeps growing until you remove the toxin. We are not genetically predisposed to metabolic disease. Whole food, whatever the macronutrient, whatever the source, is not driving disease. This all starts with processed food. Remove the processed food, you eliminate the disease.